Hey, Justin, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine. Yep.
Awesome. There's always a little bit of that pre-discussion anxiety where you don't know if your stuff's actually going to work okay. So,
Every episode, it's like I'll hear the audio and then it'll be the video or the video and then the audio, and everyone's like, trying to troubleshoot everything like that. And it's like, oh my gosh, I love it. It's so funny.
oh, the wildest thing is I've used like things like Zoom and Teams for years through
Yeah,
work. And then, of course, when it comes to my personal computer, the stuff hardly ever fires up right. I swear to God.
right.
So,
And this one seemed flawlessly. Like you popped up, it was audio, video, and there was no like issues. And I was like, "This is gonna be successful, man."
we'll take it.
Cool.
Seriously.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being on my podcast. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
Is there anything you want to promote before we get started with all the questions and the geekery?
Yeah, I've got just let's see, just really a couple things. I've got this album Ritual coming out sometime probably early summer. Initially I was shooting for late spring, but we're probably not going to hit that date. We're reworking the album art right now, so kind of more to come on that piece. But the other thing, we have a show coming up on May 21st at the 7th Street Entry in Minneapolis, which is a pretty historic uh, place. A lot of very large bands end up coming through just prior to their big breakthrough. Bands like Nirvana is certainly a very notable name that came through there back in the day. Babes in Toyland got their start there. The Replacements, really kind of the heart of indie Minneapolis music, seems to launch out of that venue at some point. So those are the main things, really.
Awesome. Well, cool, man. Thank you so much. So
Yeah.
let's start with the album. Do you want to go into details about the recording of the album, or are you trying to keep that secret?
Oh no, no. I mean, I'm a pretty open book when it comes
All
to
right,
that kind
cool.
of stuff. So
So
yeah,
I checked out Ritual. You sent me kind of an early, and I absolutely love it. I feel like there's a lot of progression where it's getting I mean, you still have your retro wave, synth wave, but then it feels like it's getting a lot of gothier elements and some post punk. Tell me about how you kind of came up with Ritual, kind of going in, and then kind of how you started recording it, kind of coming at it.
yeah. I love that question actually because it's been a journey. I was just talking the other day, actually with a couple of the members of the Toilet Rats about the progression of North Innsbruck and how we got to where we were. And things really started with more of that kind of very romantic dreamwave sound, and that was more of an early discovery and kind of my drive back into, I guess you could say, electronic music or even recording and production to that point. I had been in a number of bands over the years, and eventually bands break up. That's pretty common, and lives happen. Some people get married, some folks have kids, some people do both. I mean, on the darker side of things, some people pass away as well, certainly. And so the community shifts and changes. And so I was really looking for something to do a bit more as a solo project, and of course it hasn't stayed that way now. It's grown into something else. But to go more in the direction of your question there, yeah, we started in this retro wave, dream wave sound, highly influenced by bands like Time Cop 1983. I would say the maybe the Midnight, not so much just because they had a bigger full band type of sound, which wasn't what I was going for, but really in a sense that general genre of music. It was a lot of fun. I learned a ton about production and grew a lot as an artist at that time. Uh, but after really kind of, I don't know, maybe one and a half albums into actually working on that, I was looking for something more, looking for something different, something that had a bit more drive or a bit more impact. And so what I ended up doing was funneling my energy, and this was basically right at the end of the pandemic as well. So there's almost like a cognitive shift that took place to a certain degree, and pushed through an album called Mindbender. It was technically, oh gosh, the third, maybe you could say fourth release by North Innsbruck to a certain degree. I kind of consider it the second real album that I released at that point in time. But that was very driven by more of a dark synth sound, really heading in the direction, almost touching on some of the more black metal influences as well, and pulling in essences of electronica. Bjork was a heavy influence for me at that point in time. So there's some rhythmic ideas that I heavily borrowed from her album Homogenic
That's
specifically.
so cool that you noticed that. I noticed that as well. But yeah, keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. That's cool you caught that piece of it because that was a huge influence. She was a major introduction to for me in the mid 90s or so into really electronic music, more contemporary, I suppose, beyond Wendy Carlos or some of the more early artists releasing, mid 80s and prior to that.
Mhm.
So the dark synth sound, to come back to that piece of it, there was I love horror movies. I
We,
have I
yeah, we'll go into that
right.
later. Believe me,
Yeah,
I'll geek out too. But go ahead.
sounds good. Sounds good. But yeah, that was a big influence on the sound, both for Mindbender, but also going into Ritual. And Ritual was really more of a progression beyond what I had done with the Mindbender album. Leaned a bit more heavily into the retro horror film type of elements to it, which will certainly be obvious as people get a chance to listen to the record once it's released. But also finding some more, I guess, some more interests of my own personal, I don't know, what am I trying to say here? More I don't know, personal musical interests, I guess, or just rephrase what I was already saying. But a piece of that really was having potentially a lead singer involved or somebody who was contributing to those elements of the album, as well as some guitar work here and there. And so I ended up connecting with an artist, Greg Online, who was a member of Plastic Boxes. We had played a few shows together over the years, and Plastic Boxes is no more, unfortunately, but Greg was doing some solo stuff, and so we kept connecting over the next year or so, trying to figure out how things could really flow together with our different styles. And Greg really truly, on top of the dark synth that I was creating and writing, brought in this post punk element that we were shooting for. But dude, he nailed it.
Ultimately, I was like, wow, like it just blew everything wide open. And I was just like, this is amazing. I can't wait for everybody else to hear it. It's spectacular.
Thank you so
Uh,
much. I appreciate that. And I had that same impression once I heard Greg's contributions to the record, specifically that song Archduke of Nightmares. When I sent that one to him, I actually sent him the whole album. I was a bit afraid he was going to pick that song as one of the ones to work on. And when he said that was it, I was like, well, let's see what happens, because I was very happy with the instrumental version. And as it turns out, he sent that track back, and it was like, to the point, just mind blowing. It's incredible what the right person can do to a song once it gets into their hands. I couldn't be happier, more excited with it.
oh, it's so good. It's such a fantastic track. So yeah, he did amazing. Vocally, everything just came together so beautifully. I was just like, this is gonna be something else, man. This is gonna be great.
Awesome.
I can't wait. So
I
oh,
appreciate that.
and then so inspirational, like is it more social, more political, or are you just kind of having fun with horror on this one?
So awesome question there. It did have initially, and it still does, kind of at a baseline, a very political influence, and that came into play more lyrically, as well as, I suppose, topically, with a number of the song names, certainly. And having conversations with Greg about the lyrical content. At the time we were discussing some of our personal interests and what was going on in the world as well. And again, thematically with the names, it gave Greg something to lean into. It ended up driving the initial cover work as well, being highly political. In fact, the real original cover work, which is not included with what I sent to you, uh, was was heavier in that direction
Yeah.
than I intended.
It was funny because I was listening to it and I like looking at the cover art and everything, and I was like, oh, okay, this is, like I could see where this is going, but that's cool.
Hey, all right. Well, and the idea here is, that I should say real quick, the artist who did the original cover art, he did exactly what I was looking for. The catch came when I started to assemble the whole album, get everything together, and looking at the full package. That my request for the art itself was maybe a bit off from the image that I want to present with North Innsbruck. It's not that I don't have political beliefs or interests, but I also don't want this band to be that type of band. We're heavily horror influenced cinematically, and I want to lean much more heavily into that side of things, and really have that be the artistic drive behind it. We're no Rage Against the Machine. I, as much as I would love to articulate myself as well as they do, I don't think I personally have that gift. Maybe I do, but I'm not going to go there with this. And so really leaning into the horror side of it. I connected with the same artist who did the Mindbender cover album or cover art there, Tim Monsters. He's a local guy here in the Twin Cities who is not only a phenomenal artist, but he's also kind of a ringleader of sorts of the horror film community. He hosts a number of different retro horror film events around town at different movie theaters, different cinemas, with different types of themes as well. Big one that I end up attending at least twice a month is Cinema of the Macabre. It's a blast. It's usually late 70s, throughout the 80s, early 90s horror films, things that I never had a chance to see as a kid growing up in the theater because it was a bit mature for me at the time. But being able, right? Seriously, yeah, being
Like,
able to go now and see like Friday the 13th Part 3 in 3D, or sticking with the 3D theme, Jaws 3 3D, which was just a trip. So anyhow, got reconnected with Tim on the cover art piece of it, and he's working on it currently. We're pushing more towards a cult theme really for it, which also ties into the record nicely. So that's where we're going. So politics, yes, but on the same hand, trying to keep things a bit more open ended there, not pigeonhole ourselves into a specific area, at least politically again. So
I can see
yeah,
where there's like a folk horror element to it, and folk horror and socially conscious and political, they've always gone hand in hand. And I saw
yeah,
this documentary where they kind of dabbled in it. It was like a 3 or 4 hour documentary. I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head, but it's out there on the streaming services. And they
yep,
start from the very beginning, early folk horror, where it's all literature, and then they kind of move it into movies, and then everything that, and then they go from different cultures and different continents on their interpretation of certain folk horrors and stuff like that. So with this album, it kind of having those elements of folk horror, and horror elements, and even moments of social or politically consciousness, where it's not overpowering like Rage Against the Machine, but it's subtle, and you're going, okay, there's a little bit more to the song than what you know what I'm saying? So you
absolutely,
you feel it, you understand it, but it's not like preachy. You know what I mean?
yeah,
If it makes sense. Yeah.
totally, yeah,
Beautiful.
and not in your face. Really, it is. It's
Yeah.
that the latent content behind the album itself. And you think about some of the go back to 80s horror again, movies like like They Live or The Stuff, which are very heavily focused on the consumerism side of it, but have a clear message, to your point, without being right in your face, is huge. And that's really, I suppose, I'm glad you articulated that, really what we're going for when there's certainly a message, but on the same hand, it's something that's a bit more behind the scenes than being completely obvious.
Yeah. No, it's funny you brought that up, because when you posted the stuff thing, I was like laying there thinking, and I was like, there was two movies in the 80s where it kind of fun, and it was They Live and The Stuff. And at the
Yes,
time it was like there was, they kind of poked fun at sort of, social and political type stuff and consumerism and everything like that. But it's like you don't get that too often. You know what I mean? Where, I mean, there's moments of it where if you watch like A24s or Neon or whatever, they kind of have those moments, but
yes,
nothing is quite as fun as they were
mm-hmm.
like in the 80s, with the stuff. It was like, it was so kind of slapstickish. And even with They Live, there's a lot of those moments where you're socially aware and consciously aware of certain things, but then you got you got them fighting in a back alley, for
Yes,
5 minutes.
exactly.
So,
Well, and to that point, focusing on that era versus more contemporary films, writers, directors, special effects, they had to be incredibly creative at that time, and
yeah,
really find unique and special ways of doing things. They didn't have the CGI that we have now, and so it really was finding um, this way to physically kind of, in a sense, make it happen while still having some sort of impact with lighting, I suppose, and all of these other factors that come into play to really create something spooky. It's a very gritty way of filmmaking, and again with North Innsbruck, we're really trying to hit that aspect of it again. There's not a lot of audio processing behind the record itself. There's not necessarily a lot of effects. Much of what we're hearing comes directly off of the synthesizers behind me and kind of the wall that I'm facing as well. Just the raw sound that these audio engineers, audio designers, sound designers really came up with back then. I've had people reach out to me and say, hey, how much of this sound are you creating on your own? You're sitting there twisting knobs to find it. And in my personal opinion, I don't think I could do it any better than the people who were doing it back then. So why not lean into what they did, what they created, and leverage that to find something a bit more, a bit more. I don't know what the word I'm looking for here again is something a bit different maybe from what we're seeing today. I have this gift of using all this old technology, but fusing it with what's on this laptop right here in front of me, using this powerful tech now to really to do something special, to drive them and use them in a way that people 20, 30, 40 years ago could only dream about.
Cool. And what's your main like primary? Do you have a certain one where you're here's my primary synth, and then I just kind of branch out from there? Do you have a primary, and are you using, what specific, DAWs are you using for stuff?
Yeah. So for the DAW, I use Ableton Live. That's
Okay.
really what I started with about maybe 8 years ago or so, and that was really coming back into use of it when I was 13 in the mid 90s. I had a guitar teacher who I wouldn't say we are necessarily hitting a wall because I'm not a great guitarist by any means, but we're trying to find something different to really kind of grab my interest at the time as a kid, and he introduced MIDI to me, and we played around with that in an old Apple computer for maybe 3 to 6 months or so, and he really kind of taught me some tricks of the trade, so to speak. And then I hadn't really touched anything MIDI related for, oh gosh, well, till 2017, 2018 or so. So quite a few years in between to that point. So at the time, I did a fair amount of research and really just decided with the equipment that I had, the computer and the resources, that Ableton was the best option for me, especially with the idea of potentially wanting to do live performances. So it was still 3 to 4 years down the road. But again, seemed to be the best option, and highly recommended by a lot of the people who are currently doing electronic music production. As far as the synth side of it, a lot of it started initially with three synthesizers. A Moog Subsequent 37, which is actually put away in a case over here from a show the other night. So I'll leave that as is. But I also have, at that time, I also had an Arturia Drum Brute that was a simple drum machine that, at the time I liked the appearance of it. I didn't really know much about the sound quality. The actual sound patches it came with, I'm not personally nuts about, but it's still a great piece of equipment. It's very functional. And so I was using that at the time along with, right here, I think that's at the Juno 106
Mm-hmm.
as well.
All that. Yep.
Yeah, Craigslist is a gold mine for old synthesizers. And if you're willing to put in the time and wait and meet with people and test things and check things out, you can come across some pretty awesome stuff at a reasonable price.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely. No.
pro tip there for people watching this. but that's where it really started for me. Those three pieces of gear, more in the Dreamwave realm, and then it was kind of one thing after another, and pulling old synthesizers out of the closet that I had been carrying around with me for years and not really understanding why I had them. But now I bet I don't know, there must be 19 or 20 or so different pieces of gear hanging on the walls around here. It's like a guitar center.
Yeah.
So
I was noticing it's a beautiful set. I like when, certain musicians, I'll have them on, and I like knowing that there's different environments where you'll see the gear in the back, or, you'll kind of see their setup. Or my most recent one, she decided to do it at the venue that she frequents and that is part of, kind of helps out with certain goth events and stuff like that. And she had a beautiful story about that. So seeing this stuff, I like it. It just really brings a lot of life to this podcast. And even seeing the microcorg back there, I got mine over here. So yeah.
yes, absolutely. It's a wonderful synth that I think deserves more credit even than it gets, because people see a small piece of gear, but it's incredibly powerful inside. In fact, going back to the Toilet Rats, that was one of the synths that I brought with for the live show itself when we were down in Rochester recently. That and the Moog Subsequent 37 are a great live combo. You've got a bass mono synth and this very light, very tough. I mean, it's like a tank, those micro corgs. I had a gig at a convention here in the Twin Cities, 2D Con, and I was getting a little too excited about the set, I suppose you could say, and it ended up pushing the synthesizer off the back of the table that I had it resting on, and it crashed to the floor. I'm telling you, that thing, we picked it right up, put it right back on its stand again, and it works perfectly. There isn't even a scratch on it. I don't know how is that even possible, but hey, it works great still, and I'm still using it in the studio to this day, and when I'm going out and on the road. So
I got hookup where it can be like a keytar. Like I had that
nice.
popped off, but I had a little because I would have like a guitar strap, and so I can just
I love it. I
guitar it up.
love it.
And then I got my MIDI controller is beat because of course playing live, you can see the
Beautiful.
full blown 9 Inch Nails level sometimes where I'm just kind of getting into it and then just cocoon. It still plays, but it looks looks a little
Yeah.
full. When you go live, do you have, of course, your primaries? I know the Moog and everything like that. And then do you use like backtracks and stuff like that?
Yeah. Yep. Part of the reason for having Ableton Live there, and in fact, so most of what I have for backing tracks now is a wave file.
Okay,
I
cool.
used to I used to perform exclusively off MIDI, but the volume of gear that I needed to bring with me to places and the time it took to set up and the room it took up on stage it was a bit much for one person, really, when it comes down to it. And so at this point, depending on the song, there's typically anywhere from maybe it could be as simple as 6 to 8 backing tracks to maybe, oh gosh, I think 17 to 20 is maybe where it maxes out for me for the most part. But to that point, typically what I'm doing with the Moog is it's really simple bass lines. I'm not a piano player at all. It's been a process learning how to play synthesizers. It's taken a few years. Initially, when I started, everything was run by MIDI, and I was more so tweaking sound elements through different filters and managing the sound that way. Even the drum machine and other items. Well, at this point in the last maybe 3 to 4 years, I've been working pretty hard at getting better at playing the synths. And so having something like the Subsequent 37, which is a great mono synth, you're not having to do a lot of chording with your left hand, but you can still play that fairly simple bass line. And then with that micro Korg as well, that gives me more of an opportunity to I suppose play more maybe, and I'm right-handed as well, so it's a little bit easier to maintain melodies and other things as well, and certainly do some chording and using different sound elements that come from that synth. And again, it's got that sound synth, both that and the Moog have such rich palettes that it makes things relatively easy. They both have giant sweet spots when it comes to creating sound, and that's really been the idea behind it. So it started as, like I said, kind of controlling MIDI, controlling sound elements to, in the last couple of years or so, actually playing the music, which was scary, very scary.
Yeah.
But I think as performers, we have a bit of a commitment to getting better at our craft and continuing to grow, especially on stage. I mean, people want to actually see that you're playing, especially when you have other musicians coming to sets to check it out. They'll right, yeah.
You to meet that level of intensity, even with, I learned this from comedians where they say if a comedian kills up on stage, you want to match that intensity and that fun and that level. So it's
Yeah.
like you really want there to be this like either keep it at a level or get better. You don't want to bring it down to where it's like, oh shit, I just brought the level. You know what I mean? Like
Yes.
want that intensity where you're going, okay, I'm going to match that or I'm going to do better. You know what I mean?
Oh, I totally get what you're saying there, and you've got that's so spot on. It couldn't be more true, and I think that's been one of the exciting pieces about learning how to actually play and get your hands truly dirty and even make some mistakes. Is it gets you a bit out of that maybe opening slot, or with local bands being the very last band of the night where people are starting to filter out or so already at that point in time. It gives you that opportunity to draw people in, to earn that right to be center stage to a certain degree, where people are going to listen. They're going to hopefully purchase your album, maybe buy a t-shirt or bring some stickers home and put them on their notebook, right? So it's a lot of work, but the rewards are wonderful. And beyond all of that as well, if you're engaging on stage, you're meeting more people. And I'm very social. I love making friends, and I was just reflecting on that just a little bit ago on an Instagram post, how I've had these opportunities now to meet some really dynamic and cool people, not just locally, but folks from other states who have been willing to fly and travel here to Minnesota to do shows with us because we're doing some really cool stuff here.
Yeah.
Places, things you don't find in other places, even.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was talking with Tommy Ratz about just the Midwest. Like
Yeah,
the Midwest is I'm realizing this with the podcast thanks to this because I've been trying to get more Midwest artists. You know, of course, you got East Coast, West Coast.
yep,
Everybody's kind of doing their own thing, but the Midwest, we're cultivating something. And even with
mm-hmm.
your bio, you're talking about a lot of contributions to like the synth wave and retro wave and just synth work and punk bands and post punk. Like there's something bubbling that a lot of
Yes.
people aren't quite aware of, and it's beautiful, dude. I can't wait for it to take some legs, man. It's getting out there, dude. I can't wait.
Absolutely. It's really exciting. One of the things that we started, me and two other guys, Eric from a podcast called The Paradise Arcade, and then Mike Rez, who's a local DJ. The three of us worked together on really putting together the first. I say this with a little bit of hesitation, but I don't know of anything that came before us, but really the first synthwave show up here in the Twin Cities in Minnesota, perhaps maybe even to a certain degree within the Midwest. And that started all in early 2019. We really corralled a group of about a half dozen or so musicians together who all had synth elements or were all toying around in the synthwave world and said, hey, let's all meet up at a bar. Essentially, let's get to know one another and let's talk about putting on a show. And it turns out about, like I said, half dozen maybe or so bands all got together. We set up kind of an appointment of sorts with the booking manager of a venue in town and said, hey, we're going to get together here, we're going to have a beer, and if you have 10 minutes, if you could stop by our table, we want to pitch an idea to you. And it turned out to be amazing because the people that we were able to pull in were some fairly notable synthwave people who had been doing some great work for a few years. One of them was D Notive. Is Matt is kind of the main person behind that band. He actually lives about a mile away from me. He learned how to drive in my neighborhood. So when we met, we were instantly like kin. Like it was amazing. Or another person who lives up in the area here in the Midwest is Galaxy 80. He's I don't know, he's one of my first introductions to the actual synthwave genre, which was crazy. I had bought his records from Time Slave out of the UK. So I'd actually heard of him before I realized he lived here. And I had that knowledge of him being in the area. It was like, well, dude, do you want to be part of something like this as well? So he came to that first meeting. We had Eric and Kyle, who are kind of the hosts of Paradise Arcade. They came in. Like I said, Mike Rez, the DJ, he was there. We had Night Audit as well. His name's Sean. He's a local musician from a number of different bands, Astronomique and the New Monarchs, who was doing his own solo synthwave stuff that had been taking off. And there were a couple others as well who joined us. So it was like this really influential, powerful group of trailblazers all came together to put on this first show. And it was pretty wild. By the time we did our first official show, I'll use my air quotes there, at the venue that we had spoken with, I bet our turnout had to be in the realm of maybe 70 or so people. And granted, that's not huge, but for a lot of us, our first gig,
Yeah, it's
oh,
solid gig. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, totally cool. So this Nitrowave Twin Cities thing that we did, and Matt from Denotive came up with the name for that to give him credit, has really opened a lot of doors for us. Granted, we got shut down for a good 6 months or so during the pandemic, but once venues started to open up, we were reaching out and saying, hey, we want to do some small shows, and really started from there and continued to get more names out there, other bands we were working with, and like I said earlier, even people flying from outside Minnesota to come here and perform with us. Folks like Destroyer, who's out of New Orleans. I think he might have been in New York at the time, possibly, but he's phenomenal. Safaro came from Ohio, flew this way. We've had Watch Out for Snakes up here, who came from Atlanta, and Street Cleaner, I think he's in San Diego, if I'm not mistaken. Morris Black was here as well with those guys. So it's been pretty cool. It's amazing the doors that have opened for us as a result of just working to do something cool and really building a reputation to that
Yeah.
point.
That's awesome because I had Betamax on and he was talking about
Yes.
how he was like the last big one that he did like this sort of like synthwave festival or
Ooh.
whatever was across the seas, and he was like it's amazing. He's like I feel like the scene isn't as thriving as it used to be. I'm gonna have to send him your way because he's been talking about wanting to get back into playing live again, and
Yes.
gonna get that would be that would open
Yeah.
a lot of doors for him. So, but he's been killing it lately with musically, and it's funny that I was thumbing through your Bandcamp, and
Yes.
Empire's Stepdad was on. I think he bought one of your albums, and I haven't heard
Yeah.
that dude in years. And it's funny, I emailed him, and I was like,
Yes.
I'm looking for more artists on my podcast. I'm always dropping lines. And he's like, you seem familiar. And I was like, dude, we used to talk, blah, 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 blah. So I might be getting him on. So that's so cool that, I mean,
That's
there's so
awesome.
many links and bringing just the Midwest, dude. And you guys have been
Yeah.
just, oh my God. Like, I'm so jealous about the Twin Cities between talking with you and Tommy. It's just like, you guys are killing it. And I'm going to have to find my way up there at some point next time you guys have like a festival.
Absolutely.
Just bring the podcast up and just start talking with everybody and just
Yes.
get to know
That
this.
would be amazing.
That'd be amazing.
Yeah. Actually, once that all comes together, Tommy and I, we have been talking for, maybe the last 8 to 9 months about really getting in North Innsbruck and Toilet Rat Show back on the kind of on the board. We initially connected, I think it was back in December or so. We did a show with Night Audit, Sean, who I was just talking about. He really pulled us together. And ever since then, I mean, with the elements of their songs as well, I mean, really kind of horror theme, tongue in cheek at times, but
Yeah.
but just solid synth punk. And then what we're doing with North Innsbruck, which is this dark synth with post punk elements. I mean, it's like peanut butter and jelly or mac and cheese. Like it's a great combination together.
Yeah.
And we're going to figure that out. Like I'd mentioned earlier too, I was just down in Rochester, specifically with Toilet Rats, filling in on keys for them down there. So we're starting to kind of, blend and mash things up a little bit. And once we have that opportunity to actually get together in a venue, it's going to be phenomenal. I mean, we're going to blow that place up. It's going to be fun.
Cool. Awesome. Let's go back a little bit. Let's kind of go to the history of
Yeah.
you and how you kind of started as a musician and then eventually get to North
Yeah.
Innsbruck. Okay, so growing up, did you grow up in the Twin Cities? Are you born and raised Midwest?
Midwest. I actually grew up in more central
Okay.
Minnesota, kind of on the northern edge of central Minnesota more so. And we had in the town that I grew up in, there was there still is, but there's a convent where there is, you could take music lessons there essentially. And that's really where I was first introduced to specifically bass guitar. Me and some friends wanted to start a band. We were like 12 years old kind of a deal. And everybody had their instruments picked out more or less. And I was trying to decide, did I want to do keys or did I want to do bass guitar? Because nobody played bass guitar. Well,
You too either.
right.
It's so funny. Depending on what band, most people you're like, oh, I'm gonna do a punk band. Blink
Yeah.
182, Green Day. Everybody wants to start with the punk band. Anyway,
Yeah.
anyways, go ahead.
Oh, good. Yeah. Well, at the time, I mean, we didn't even know what kind of music we were going to play. We just wanted instruments more so to get together and make noise more than anything else. And although that never really happened, I did end up starting a band with two of my friends from high school, my buddy Ryan, and then my other friend, Steve, who is actually a Twin Cities musician here. And he's one of those people where our paths just keep crossing. Currently, he's the drummer for a band called The Four on the Floor up here as well, who seems to have quite a bit of notoriety, actually. It's fun to see or to have seen him grow as a musician over the years and see where he's at as well, knowing that we started playing lousy, maybe for 13, 14-year-olds, maybe not lousy, but I know cover songs, Nirvana and Offspring and some of those other bands, mid 90s influence, punk and grunge bands.
Yeah.
So that was really where it all started, more so way back when.
Mm-hmm. And then so, you wanted to be in a band, you started kind of dabbling in music. Was that kind of in the beginning where it was like punk, all that 90s, punk
Yeah.
stuff and just, alternative and everything like that? Was that kind of your building blocks on how you kind of became you kind of situation?
Yeah, that really, to that point, that I would say that was certainly one of the more influential moments in my life or periods in my life, just developmentally, musically. A lot of us start to discover music probably around 9, 10, 11 years old or so. So right about the time I started to really get into music was at the time grunge just exploded, and so I'd really gone from a lack of awareness of most music, but liking stuff that I had heard in movies, like Tron, for example. That was a movie we watched quite a bit as a kid, and so I know one way or another that wormed into my brain and created the musician that I am today. But that was really the starting point for us, be it, like I've said Nirvana a few times, or Green Day, or some of these other bands of that period. We named our band Dirt after the Alice in Chains album, of course. I mean, how cool is that for
Okay,
a
right.
couple 13-year-olds? Like, damn. But yeah, so it was a lot of fun. And at that point, really gave me a taste of creating music and playing in a band, and how messy it can be at times, but on the same hand, how much joy it not only brought to me, but I could see it in the in my fellow bandmates and their expressions as we were playing, and even our friends who were stopping by to check out what we were doing at the time. So it was a real gift, and really did, to that point, create the person that I am today.
That's cool. And tell me, when did it kind of start becoming serious, where it's like,
Yeah.
were you listening to electronic music and then you wanted to make it, or did that kind of come later? Tell me how that kind of developed.
Yeah. Yeah, so as I got a little bit older, I went to college, and when I was in college, I wasn't that heavily involved in music. I certainly had a great respect for it, and collected all my music and CDs and downloads and all that kind of stuff at the time, but hadn't really picked up or maybe plugged in a guitar in quite a while. And so after I'd moved to the Twin Cities here, I made a conscious decision. I wanted to get reconnected to music, but not knowing many people here at the time, I got more involved in solo work, so creating and writing folk music more than anything else. And hey, we're the home of Bob Dylan. I mean, come on, right? Well, where he was born, at least. I'm not sure where
Right,
he lives now,
exactly. No,
but
yeah,
but yeah, everybody wants to be Bob Dylan at some point
everybody
up
wants to
here,
be
I feel
Bob.
like. So right.
Or what do you got?
So
Yeah.
so yeah, so I really kind of stuck to that for a good maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 years. I'm not really sure officially when I stopped doing it. I wouldn't say necessarily stopped at this point either. I just don't really play that a whole lot. But it was a lot of playing coffee shops, empty coffee shops to that
Yeah.
point, and eventually I decided to make more of a shift, and it wasn't really until about 10, maybe 10 years ago, that I really started to think more about MIDI, or it came back into my consciousness to a certain degree as to what I could do or what I might be able to do with a tool like that. And so that's really where it started, was hearing some of these more contemporary bands again, where they were two pieces, but they had this full sound, and it didn't make sense to me initially. But then I started to understand the idea that, yeah, those computers that are up on stage, that be it rap groups or rock groups are using, are actually, they have a purpose. They don't just look good. And I started to put two and two together, that it was these DAWs, these digital audio workbooks, that were driving a huge part of the sound. And to build off of that, just to jump to modern day, me and my partner just went to go see a Japanese band called Hanabi, and it's a 4-piece all female band. Phenomenal, so good. But you could tell listening to it that beyond the drums, the bass guitar and singer they had on stage, there was a plethora of backing tracks that were supporting it, but it sounded good, and the audience was really into it as well. It's like it didn't matter as much that the computer was supporting their work. So 10 years ago, I had to get comfortable with the idea that I wouldn't be playing every instrument live for every song. And that really started the imagination engine, if you will, where it was like, okay, I've got these old synths in the closet. Let's pull those out. And seriously, I was the kind of kid who was shopping the classified section in my hometown newspaper looking for stuff. Or if I'd have friends moving out of Minnesota, as people get older, like, I don't want to live here anymore. Hey, Chris, do you want this piece of gear? I never turned them down. I was like, okay, sure, why not? Where am I going to put it? Who cares? So I had all this gear sitting around, and I knew that I could interface it one way or another with my computer. So it was really a matter of figuring out what tools and what resources actually made it happen. And it took some time, because some of this gear isn't cheap either, or maybe easy to figure out in some cases. And so there was a lot of success and failure that came over the first maybe couple of years of actually figuring out how to even make this happen. Something as simple as figuring out the right way to connect MIDI cables to the 5-pin DIN, getting those connected to my computer. That it took a little bit of time, and fortunately a lot of research, so I didn't make as many errors maybe as I would have, just trying to fly by the seat of my pants with all of that too. So yeah, right around that 8-year ago period or so, it was the point where I figured I had learned enough that I could start actually releasing some of the music. And when it started, it was pretty rudimentary. You know, it was maybe 4 synthesizers or so at the time, really producing the sound, and it was recording everything live right off of a mixer. So so it, you know, I look back and I listen to that now, and I don't want to say I cringe necessarily inside. That's far from the case. I was really proud of what I was doing then, and I know it was a stepping stone to getting to where I'm at now. And that's been the big shift. Now we've got a much bigger sound. I've been able to take what I've learned over the last years and really mold it and hone it, kind of like a sculptor to a certain degree, to find exactly what I wanted to do and to get there. Has the sound finished evolving? I doubt it. I mean,
Never know. Never
conversation,
know.
right? Yeah, exactly. And conversations this last weekend in Rochester, specifically with Tommy Ratz, he was talking about the evolution of the sound. He said, "Wow, you really don't feel obligated to stick to any one style specifically." You know, listening through the catalog, and I hadn't really been very conscious of that, because to me it's all connected by a thread. You know, it's all there, but the progression has definitely changed things a lot, from that dreamwave sound to a dark synth post punk driven sound, which I don't know. I love. I'm super proud of the way things have gone, and I'm not ashamed to say that. There's been a few songs that have come out or that will be coming with this next album that I have a hard time believing that I wrote to a certain degree, because you go through this whole process and all of a sudden you get to the end and you're like, damn, how did I even get from point A to point B? Specifically that song Archduke of Nightmares, the second one on the album, that was the one. I've got my mixer over here. I had been working on it for about 3 weeks, and the first version of it I trashed because it came out as more of an outrun song, and I there was by no intention, it just happened, and I couldn't live with it. It didn't fit the sound that I wanted. It didn't go where I wanted it to. Although it was a good song, I've gone back and listened to it. It's not something I think I'll release anytime soon, or maybe ever. But I ended up trashing pretty much everything out of that except for the general song structure itself, and started over from scratch. And it took about 3 weeks, but all of a sudden this like banging instrumental came out of it. And when it was done and I had it like basically finished recording it, the first thing I did was load it onto my phone and ran it upstairs to my wife. And I was like, dude, and she's working on her computer. I think she's actually working that day. I'm like, you need to pause
You hear
and
this?
listen to this one, right? This is a freaking banger, you know? And I don't usually do that because I don't know, it's not a very humble thing to do.
Yeah, yeah. I got my wife. There's times where I'll do something and I'll just geek out. I'm like, you gotta hear this, you know? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you believe your partner created this? You know, like, so, so yeah, so that was one of those though, where it was just like, damn, holy shit. I can't believe I actually, I pulled it off this time. And who knows if, you know, that peak will be reached again. Dear God, I hope it does, but there's special things that happen when you get into that zone.
Mhm.
And I'm excited. I'm excited to start working in the studio again, but I have to actually push this next album out first and support it with some shows. So baby steps.
Yep. No, I get that. And so it's, you're kind of building on this album and you got a couple is Archduke going to be like the first single that's going to come out, or do you have any other?
Yeah, Archduke is the first planned single for it. It's already been added to a compilation, which has been pretty exciting. We were a part of, was it 3 weeks ago, the Fireseek Festival here in the Twin Cities that was organized by Cody from Stranger Gallery, who is just an amazing person who's done so much work for the Twin Cities dark music scene specifically. But some of the bands that he was able to pull in and really have be a part of it, a local one, The Rope, who is one of my favorite bands here, relative to post-punk. Touring bands would have been Academy Order was one of the bands that came through that we supported.
I got a history with that one. It's funny because I'm still
Yeah.
waiting. Sorry, I don't want to interrupt you, but
Oh, good. No.
so I had an interview with Frost Newcastle from Cartilage Casanova, and
Yes.
it hasn't been out yet because he's doing the editing and he's bringing the interview and the podcast into his world where he's been doing a lot of I'm trying to find the right term for it, where it's he'll make videos that are like video games, and he has his own
Yes.
world. Like he shared all the details with me, and I can't wait for it to come out because I'm going to kind of show him, or I'm going to kind of let everybody know that he does this sort of separate thing. Anyway, so he was telling me that Academy came over and was like staying the night at his place. And so I've been trying to get them on the podcast. And it's just
Yes.
kind of opening my world to all these different artists. And it's exciting. Like it's exciting for all of us, in the music and electronic world where it's just like, there's something happening here. You know what I mean?
Yes. Absolutely. And the doors that are opening as a result of that as well. I mean, there's the culture that's growing with just dark music in general, we'll put it that is incredible. And it seems to be growing exponentially right now. The quality of the bands and beyond all that, the work that they're putting into their imagery. Bellhead was another one that came through, but specifically to lean into Academy Order,
I got
like
coming on
they
too.
are.
Yep.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I got them coming on too, like later on this month, or later on this year. But yeah, go ahead.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Oh, that's it. But the aesthetic, the sound, the visual piece of what all these bands are doing is just it's next level, and it's really cool to see the theatrics that come into play with all of it as well. It's becoming such a unique and special form of art, really performance art in many cases, with excellent music tied into it, which has been really fun, extremely eye-opening as well. That people are willing to push the boundaries there and to take some of those risks to create something so unique and so cool and so engaging. I mean, both of those bands, watching them play at Fireseek Festival was a treat. It was something that I didn't expect to see here in the Twin Cities at all. But the fact that hundreds of people showed up for something like this at a fairly large venue was really encouraging. We're doing some good work here, and people are paying attention.
That's so awesome. And so when did you start like performing like I know you said you were doing folk stuff and kind of
Yep.
that kind of start your sort of songwriting process where you're kind of honing your craft and everything like that?
Yeah, you nailed it there. That's really it. Being as a teenager, being in more of a cover band, you learn kind of the skills of performance. You learn how to play your instrument. You learn how to communicate with other artists. But then that ended. I moved on to a different stage in my life, and I left that behind for a while. And so, really, the folk music piece of it was connecting with other people within the community. Andrew Calhoun, who's from Chicago, was, I wouldn't say necessarily an official mentor, but I studied his music and I had met him a few times and offered some very encouraging feedback on the songwriting I was doing, but also offered information on growth, things that I could do to become a better artist and musician. And so, I remember him presenting to me, 365 songs in a year type of challenge, which I didn't write that many, but still hammered through dozens and dozens of songs. Most of them were pretty terrible, but that daily process of writing a song, and you get better at which chords work with other chords, or hey, okay, now what's a capo, what's been the purpose of that, and actually pushing yourself into those areas, because it gives an opportunity to write songs in a different way. Changing key, everything was in the key of E when I started. So that's opened up doors as well there, and I think that's really it. The folk piece of it there, you have to do something with not a lot of tools and resources maybe at your disposal. It's basically your guitar and your words, more so your ability to story tell, and that those, I think, like I said, I think 6, 7, 8 years or so were very influential in my ability to write music cohesively. So as opposed to things being just a simple guitar part that repeated over and over again, which, don't get me wrong, certain bands have done phenomenal work, and some of the best songs that have come out in contemporary rock within the last 20 years are incredibly simple. I think of Seven Nation Army. That's like one guitar part, the whole song.
Minimal drums. It's just
Yeah.
it's the biggest. I mean, it's a huge song, and the guitar parts and just
Yeah.
everything's so minimal, but it just blows the roof off.
It really does. And every sporting event you go to, you hear it now. Everybody knows it.
Yeah.
And that was evidence enough that you didn't have to write complicated or complex music for it to be good. And I think that in and of itself is a huge influence over the sound of North Innsbruck. I realized, yeah, I've got a lot of gear, I've got a lot of opportunity to make things highly complex, but on the same hand, there's that simplicity that really drives a lot of very, very good music. And so with the sound we've got now, a lot of the arpeggios specifically, some of the melodic elements to what I'm doing are ideas that I've borrowed from horror films.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people will say, "Hey, John Carpenter must be a hell of an influence on the work that you've done." In all honesty, it wasn't conscious that he was a part of it necessarily, but when I go back and listen to, very closely to the Halloween soundtrack, or some of the others that are out there that he's been a part of, um, yeah, there's that DNA is absolutely present in the music that I do now, as well as a host of other horror film composers. So it's there, and it's not complex by any means in many cases. So it's definitely had its impact. That simplicity, and I don't know, I've got a great appreciation for it.
Absolutely. And was that kind of because you started dabbling in electronic,
Yeah.
synthwave, was that what blew you? You're going, oh, I love this. This is my path. Because there's so many different electronic
Yeah.
genres, but you're like, this is the one. Was it because of science fiction and horror, or were you listening to certain artists and going, because for me,
Yep.
I kind of dabbled in synthwave for a little bit because I was inspired by, I think it was Absolute Valentine, Kavinsky,
Oh
uh,
yeah.
all
Yep.
that stuff. And I'm trying to think of some others, but I'm
Yep.
losing it.
I get it. I do the same thing. Yeah.
It's like I think it was like 14 or 15, something like that, when I was like just digging in Bandcamp, looking up all these synthwave artists,
Yep.
compilations and stuff. So I mean, I totally understand. And was that kind of your stepping off point? Was it, a combination of, discovery of bands and, horror and science fiction? Did that kind of collide?
Yeah, horror and science fiction have always been a huge interest to me. It was the kind of stuff that, I remember growing up in the 80s, and my neighborhood friend, his older brother, was always renting horror VHS films, and we weren't supposed to watch them with him, but we'd totally sneak in there and, kind of peek around the corner. And, specifically the one that stands out for me is the film Chud,
Oh,
where there's like a shower scene where blood starts shooting out of the drain. Dude, I had nightmares about that for years. Or I remember Carrie, the final scene of Carrie, where the hand shoots out of the ground. I used to have nightmares about these bloody hands coming out of the ground and grabbing my ankles as a kid. Thank God those stopped. They're freaking terrifying, you
yeah.
know. And it took me years to figure out what film that actually came from as well, which it
Wow.
shouldn't have. But I didn't venture back to Carrie for many years, I guess you could say. But yeah, so that stuff absolutely was there, and I going into that, I lost track of the original question. What was that again?
It
Do you
was
remember where we were?
no, you're good.
Yeah.
I said because I know you started kind of going towards synthwave and darkwave,
Oh,
kind of
yep,
listening to bands that kind of fathered
yep,
you into
yeah. So yeah, thank you so much for that redirection there. Yeah, so where it really kind of started, I believe, and it's hard to say exactly maybe where it came into play, but you talked about maybe 2015, 2016, where I started to have a bit of an electronic reawakening in a sense, because we had gone through the early 2000s electronic music, like Crystal Method and Prodigy and some of that, which I had some interest in at the time, but I was really into punk still at that point in time. But as we started to progress, my musical interests and what I like to listen to started to shift. And so I had more so become aware of electronic music through a lot of people comment on the movie Drive.
Mhm.
My wife's sister had introduced us to that film, and she's like, I think you'll really like this. You'll dig this movie. And it was probably, oh gosh, maybe 2015, 2016 or so when we saw it. And I was like, wow, that the movie's good, but the soundtrack is what makes it, like, that is special. And so to your point, Kavinsky, I became aware of him, and College was another band that I started to get into as a result of that. And of course, I'm drawing a blank. There's a third band as well that I know is on the tip of my tongue, and I just can't spit it out right now. It'll come to me later, but they had a huge influence. And then I think too, for a lot of folks, Stranger Things came out at that point in time, and so the children of the 80s were connecting
Oh,
with this series that was coming out. And again, for me, it was, yeah, it was cool. I like the imagery of the 80s, because for the first time in my life, we were living through that nostalgia of our childhood. But the music was really it again. The sound elements that they were using, and it was like, damn, I kind of want to do that, and I think I know how to go about doing that as well. And so that was a huge stepping stone. Oops, as I bumped my
Oh, you're
computer, a huge stepping stone going forward there. I think you'll knock it over soon.
good.
Um,
No.
but and from there it was really discovery of more artists. Like I had mentioned, Time Cop earlier, Galaxy 80 being another one. Who it's crazy knowing that someone who has become a good friend of mine was an influence on the music that I was trying to create years ago. It's a small community when it comes down to it.
It's
I
great.
mean, it's awesome. There's a lot of newer people who are doing it now who are trying to kind of do their own thing and are pushing up, so to speak. Uh, in the community, a lot of it's online, but on the same hand, there are these people who are really kind of the catalysts in getting things started. And so some of those folks, and going into more the dark synth side of things, artists like Carpenter Brut and Perturbator and Ghost. I started to discover those as well through friends who are like, "Hey, have you listened to this yet? I think you'll like it," which really started to have an influence over the total sound as well. And now I have that honor, even just recently with Zach from the Toilet Rats, of talking about dark synth and saying, "Hey, have you heard of any of these bands?" And he's like, "No, send me a text message with a list." So trying to push him in that direction and open up that world to other people now as well. And that's been kind of a cool thing, having a chance to be on one of the early waves of a newer musical movement. It's a gift, and I don't think a lot of people actually get an opportunity like that to be an early-ish, not early, but early-ish creator and influencer within a music genre. So I expect I'll be doing this for a long time.
Good.
In fact, another piece of it. Sorry, I just keep talking,
Oh,
but
go ahead, please, please. This is what's for.
yeah, thank you. I'm working on pushing into is more film scoring and composition as well. I've over the last maybe 5 years or so have been connected with a friend now. His name's Josh, but he has started as a podcast called Haunting Season. It's become more of a Instagram, TikTok type of channel or show now. It's also on YouTube as well, but it's all horror based. He's a writer, he's a filmmaker, and I've been on and off, more so off recently, but writing and composing music specifically for that podcast. What I'm doing now is really trying to connect with filmmakers here in the Midwest. There's a crew up in kind of the central Minnesota area right now that's working on a horror thriller type of film that I have some detail on. I don't have a lot yet, but recently, actually, just over this last weekend, sent them an email introducing myself and saying, "Hey, I know it's a limited budget production, but I'm really looking to get connected and to build up more of my film credits in that way and start moving things a bit in that direction as well." So not only having the dark synth and the concert, the exciting music piece of it, but really stretching myself into the area that got me most interested in what I'm doing today. So I hope there's more to come there. I've found myself getting the opportunity to connect with some of the more influential composers in modern horror and even some 80s horror, which is a bit unexpected. But then again, apps like Instagram and Facebook really open up the door to meet people that I never ever would have had the chance to meet otherwise. So there's people out there that I can learn from, that I've messaged with, that have given me an idea how to get started on the composition piece for film once the right elements are in place. So pretty cool.
No, that's really rad, and it's cool to be able to find that sort of niche because I mean, filmmaking or it's strenuous and but film
Yeah.
scoring, there's so much reward to that where it's like if you can add something, a beautiful piece of music on top of something, and it just
Yep.
really, and of course, it always comes back to Friday the 13th when they were like, when they made the movie, and they're going, we need something for this.
Oh
It's
my gosh.
missing
Yeah.
depth. And then they, call, I can't think of his name, but the guy who composed it,
Manfredini, Harry Manfredini. Yeah.
thank you. And he just blew it. It was incredible. And, I really hope you find that sort of that
Yes.
comfort in bringing music into this especially independent film work, and I want to see more independent horror just getting up there, and there's a lot going on with uh horror streaming with Shudder has just opened my eyes to so much.
Oh
And
my gosh.
yeah, I'll go into that. And then
Yep.
I'm drawing a blank on another one, but it's blossoming. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So getting your
Yes.
digging in your roots musically and with, composing, man, I really hope it just
Yeah.
you see
Oh,
your roots in. Yeah.
yeah, same here. Absolutely. That's it. There's so many different things, so many opportunities that are really out there because of the resources that we have access to as filmmakers or composers or even writers now. So much of it is DIY, and that kind of forces our hand to a certain degree to be more creative, to use the resources that we have at our disposal to make something happen, as well as collaborate with artists in a way that you might not see in large cinema. We're not making money doing this stuff, and there's really no expectation. So much of it is driven by passion
Yep.
and creativity, really a wanting to be a part of something bigger than ourselves. And I think that in and of itself, if I were to go back on maybe a core definition as to why North Innsbruck or how it's gotten to the point that it is today, it's because I don't want to live in this world alone as a creative. It's not a place that's comfortable for me, and to have talented people around you, not just talented people, but people with good hearts as well, who want to be a part of something bigger than themselves, that are willing to give a piece of themselves to the community, is who I'm trying to surround myself with. And that's part of the reason we keep going back to Tommy Ratz. He
Yeah.
is one of those people. Like, that dude is a conduit for all things good and graceful.
Hmm.
I don't know how else to put it, but people are attracted, they are drawn to him. And those are the folks that are going to push our art, our film, our music into the future. That's what's going to push us and project us. It's community, it's authenticity more than anything else as well. I feel like, um, as an unfortunate result of social media, there's a lot of um, fake people. I don't know, fake people.
Oh, I
I
get it.
don't use. You get it, right? Yeah, exactly. And people are really driven and looking for someone who is more genuine, who is willing to put themselves out there to really be their true self. And that's something that I want to see more of out there, especially with the people who are directly around the creative processes that I'm a part of. I want real people. I want to see you. I want to hear you. I want to feel you. I want to know where you're coming from. I want to know what your motivations are. And once all of that's in place, you know if you've got somebody good around you. And when that happens, you have to, in a healthy way, latch on to one another, because you're going to propel each other into something much bigger than yourself.
No, I get it. And it's I feel like it's going back to the sort of punk ethos where it's one, word of mouth, and two, it's community. You need
Yes.
that community because social media does one thing. It's good at going, here's my product, here's my music, here's my thing. It's a sample, but
Yep.
you don't get the full picture until one, you see them live, two, you connect with them, and just see
Yeah.
them as good people in general because you know what I mean? You got to have a community. You can't have
Yes.
dog eat dog. You can't have one musician stabbing each other in the back and creating drama. That's not going to bring a community. It's going to rip everything apart. So you need
Exactly.
everybody coming together, helping each other out, lifting each other up, and hoping for nothing but the best for each other. And even if it's not for financial gain, it's for the love of the music, for the love of the
Yep.
scene, for the love of just being creative artists.
You nailed it right there. And to add on to what you're saying there as well, understanding that authentic people, sometimes they make errors and they make mistakes, and so there's an element of grace and forgiveness that comes into all of this, as well as being part of a community. Am I perfect? Oh, hell no. No, far from. In fact, have I misstepped sometimes as I'm learning to become a better musician and getting my art out there? Oh my gosh, yeah, more times than I can count, probably. But reflecting back on the heart of the person and giving them that space to learn and to grow, that's how we're going to get there together as well. I mean, that, to the point, that is community. It's really supporting one another in good times and bad, knowing that you're surrounded with, once again, the right people.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. And so
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to getting, I mean, we'll come back to music and creating. So when you
Yeah.
started North Innsbruck, that was the first. There was no other music project before that. That was your project, North Innsbruck, right?
Correct. Yeah. I mean, the solo folk stuff, but when it came to electronic music, it was literally, like I said, those three synthesizers and, well, and a couple others in the closet that weren't pulled out yet. But and sitting down with my partner at the time when we were still dating and being like, okay, well, let's see. I know we need a way to release this music, so we're gonna have to figure out a social media thing. And before we figure all that stuff out, we need a band name and all that kind of stuff. And not so much we, but I, and using her brain as a springboard of sorts to find things. And really, to that point, even the name North Innsbruck, that was the neighborhood that we were living at the time, and it sounded great for synthwave. And honestly, heading into dark synth as well, it gives us a creative space to center the work around. Something that I didn't send you, that at some point it'll be released, probably. I really just have to finish the mastering on it. I was talking about Josh from Haunting Season a little bit ago. The album Mindbender really started as a almost a concept album of sorts. It's really more of a spoken word album more than anything else. The current version that it's released as is it's an instrumental right now. But what Josh did was he came up with a complete storyline, 30 minutes, each song being a chapter of the story about this character. We'll call him the Mindbender, really someone who has this a psychic ability to do terrible things. And the entire story takes place in the North Innsbruck neighborhood, north of Minneapolis. And it's incredibly dynamic. I really, it's funny, the last couple of weeks I've been thinking about how I just need to do the kind of the final polishing on those tracks to make sure his spoken word, he's doing the voiceovers for it essentially. I just need to elevate that a bit more and balance it out in the music, and we're simply going to push it out as a very unique collaboration. In fact, I'm not sure anybody in synthwave or dark synth has really done anything like this before, and I'm personally not even aware of an audiobook that has musical elements contributing to it at all, yet alone from beginning to end. So very exciting, cool stuff. But
So
again, good people connecting to do cool stuff.
yeah, absolutely. Tell me, I mean,
Yep.
well, let me go into spoken. I was telling one musician I was talking with, I was like, we need more of that sort of, yeah, spoken word and music kind of storytelling or even just poetry. I haven't heard that
Yeah.
all. And I would hearing that that would be absolutely incredible. And I feel like it would be one of those things where I've heard and I can kind of do like a check mark on my list of
Yes.
that I need to hear. That would be so cool. But also this kind of off subject or whatever. Tell me about Innsbruck, North Innsbruck playing performing live for the first time. Tell me about that time, that setup, nerves. Tell me that whole story about performing live for the first time.
Yeah, yeah. So the nerves piece of it, that's a really interesting topic because I still get a little bit of pre-show jitters, but nothing like it was, the first time going out and doing it and hoping that your equipment and gear was going to work and really building up to that first show. It took a lot of time to get myself there. A big element of performing live is people are either they're listening and they've done it before or they're preparing to do it, is to learn how to set your gear up efficiently. And the
Quick.
more you have, the harder it is,
Mhm.
um, and thank God for having an amazing partner, because what I did for probably, oh gosh, not daily, but probably for 2 months leading up to my first performance, was setting up and tearing down my gear every night in our living room and actually rehearsing in that space, getting out of the studio, pulling the synths out and practicing getting the table all set up and getting the synths in the right order and figuring out how that stuff connects. Because if you don't take the time to do that, you have no idea what you're going to get yourself into. It went from taking an hour or so to getting my gear set up to about 5 minutes or so at this point in time, right? It's just a matter of knowing exactly what you need and exactly where it goes in a very specific order, because there's going to be distractions. Some cables are going to die and you're going to have to troubleshoot that very efficiently. That's a nightmare in and of itself. But getting all that prepared to at least bring down some of that anxiety. Did it make a difference? Maybe a little bit. But it turned out that the first show was actually kind of a blast. It was a unique experience. I was talking about the big show with Nitro Wave. That technically wasn't my first gig. The very first North Innsbruck show was at a record store here in the Twin Cities. Barely Brothers Records are an independent record store. They are phenomenal. To pitch them real quick, they are an all vinyl store, huge used selection, but they're very supportive of local music, and they have a stage in the back of the store. Thank God for those guys. But I hit them up. Yeah, yeah. Check out Barely Brothers, Barelybros, Bros.
I'll add them to the
They,
description on YouTube.
oh,
Go ahead.
yeah, you won't regret it. They're great. So they huge supporters of local music. Most Fridays you can catch a band performing on their stage in the back. They've got their own PA system, and a lot of it you have to set up yourself, which brings its challenges. But there's always someone in the store who can help new bands out as well. But set up in there with one other artist at the time. He went by Unholy Rat King. I don't think he performs anymore, but was very kind of a noise-driven artist. So he had a lot of different types of synths and pedals on the table and a Game Boy, and would just mash buttons, and it was complete chaos, but it was so cool. It was freaking awesome. Yeah, the Rat King. Wonder what he's up to now. But then it was the North Innsbruck set, and it was super nerve-wracking because I wasn't sure how things were going to necessarily go. I was in my studio, and I ran it out of my studio speakers and all of that, which sounded fine. But until you really sense that volume, that bass, everything, it really wraps around you, and it's scary and it's intimidating, and the butterflies that you're experiencing, you're sweating, and everybody's looking at you is intimidating as hell. It's a bit freaky, but one way or another, somehow you get through it. My biggest issue with that performance was that my computer at the time wasn't great. It was a powerful computer, but by downloading all this extra software and stuff, I had some bloatware on it that I really wasn't aware of at the time, and so it took a long time to boot up. It was kind of a nightmare. Lessons learned, some the hard way. But it was about a 30-minute performance that my friend Matt came and recorded, and I've gone back to watch it now, and it kind of makes you, makes you feel a little bit of something inside. But it really was a matter. Seriously, the whole performance was the computer playing MIDI through the drum machine and through a couple synthesizers, and me tweaking knobs. That was really it. Be it a modulator or whatever, adding distortion at times to it. Very simple, but it was kind of it was the first thing that got me really hooked into continuing. And from there, we ended up at a venue called the Hexagon Bar in the Twin Cities the next month. That was something that just kind of popped up. There was a touring musician that was looking for somebody to fill in an opening slot. That bar has burned down since then. It doesn't even exist anymore, but that was a fairly well-known local venue. And that's when we moved on to the Amsterdam Bar, where we had a fairly good draw for our third show. And finally, the fourth show was this big one with all these other artists at a place called Can Wonderland here in the Twin Cities, which was a great venue for us, because not only was was there space for artists and musicians to play, but it's loaded with old arcade games and all that kind of stuff too. So it was like this perfect space for synthwave to take place. It was just, we were surrounded with nostalgia. You couldn't have asked for a better venue to get things started there. So to go back to your question about the nerves, yeah, absolutely. I still get them from time to time. Don't get me wrong, but it's like once I get on stage now, everything's working, everything is turned on, everything has power. Worries are out the window. It's rehearsed enough now and practiced enough that I'm generally almost always prepared for things that are going to come my way. So that's a good question.
Do you have like a pre-show ritual? Do you listen to anything, or you just jump up and down? Or you have any show rituals?
So often I've found myself being more the organizer of shows, that I'm running around like a madman, making sure everybody else has what they need. And that, to be honest with you, that might be a part of the ritual there. I am making sure everybody else's needs are met, and I'm keeping busy in a sense, so I'm not thinking as much about the performance ahead of time. And when that opportunity to come up on stage comes, it's really just a matter of pulling my gear on the table, kind of back out to center stage, and giving the sound guy the cue that I'm about to get started. I don't drink before performance or anything like that, because it's not something I I really do in my regular day-to-day life as well. In fact, when I have in the past, it's been pretty minimal. I remember being in Atlanta and doing a show with Watch Out for Snakes and Arcade High. And Arcade High, they're nicest guys. They have a pre-show tradition of doing a shot of Jameson before the set. Yeah. Oh, and and that was nice. It warmed me up. It felt good. But on the same hand, it threw me off a little, a little bit, not much. So generally, when I'm up on stage, it's just me. It's the gear and keeping my head as clear as possible. After the set, I'd like to say it's a different story, but again, being more of an organizer of sorts and making sure my gear gets put away and it's in a safe place, I'm usually pretty business focused at that point in time. And I don't know, maybe I should take some of that stuff a little less seriously,
I think
but I can't.
I know. And that kind of comes to the next question is when did you start kind of going, I want to kind of organize events or kind of put together these sort of synthwave communities and stuff? Was it like a group effort? Was it you alone just going, something needs to happen? Tell me about kind of coming
Yeah.
to those epiphanies.
Yeah, that kind of goes back almost into my teenage years a bit more. Being a person who kind of corralled my group of friends a bit. I mean, granted, a lot of us grew up together, but I moved around a few times as a kid, so I always had to make new friends where I was going, and so that was a skill set I built quite early on. But also taking cue from my dad specifically. He was a big community organizer in the town that I grew up in. He was a small business owner, but he was also very involved in his church. And a part of that, we're doing these music concerts about every 2 or 3 years. He would organize something that would be in the high school auditorium, and it would include who was his best friend at the time. My dad passed away about 12 years ago now, but he his best friend in town was the high school band director. Another good friend of his was one of the choir directors. My dad was a mortician, oddly enough, and so I'm not sure how he got tied into the music people in town, but he did. And they would do every couple years these really huge, these grand musical performances at the high school that included you know a large full band, and not necessarily a rock band, but more the high school band or community members who still played their trumpets or their violins. And so it was maybe a full orchestra. I can't necessarily say, but as well, pulling in full choirs to be a piece of it. And this was a really big piece of who he was. And so I got to see the work that went behind it, the sense of community, again, going back to that word, and and the outcome, not just his own personal pride, which I don't say that in a bad way. It took a lot of work and effort to do that, but as well the affection, the love that came back to him as a part of that community. And so for me personally, I think that was a huge influence, that giving, and then to a certain degree maybe not so much, but also that receiving, and the receiving piece of it, of knowing that you have a community or group of people that you've surrounded you with that love you, and that they embrace you, and are willing to do things with you that they maybe wouldn't in other situations or with other people. And I personally see that with the work that we've done in the synthwave community up here now as well. And I'm not the only organizer, I'm not the only founder of this, far from, but connected with two other people who had a similar interest in being a part or creating something that was much bigger than themselves. And not for personal gain necessarily. Personal interest, certainly, absolutely. That's why we do this stuff. If we didn't like it, we wouldn't be a part of it. But to do something special, and that was really the mindset that we had when we got this whole thing started. It was like, how cool would it be to start a scene, to start a music scene in our community, and in the Twin Cities. I mean, we've had the Minneapolis sound that came through with Prince. We again, going back to Bob Dylan, what he had created back in his era, what Soul Asylum did in the '90s as well, or some of these other bands like Husker Du and the Replacements. These Babes in Toyland again, right? These amazing scenes that they built and they started, and the people that they surrounded themselves with. Not that we expect to achieve that level of success by any means, but really to have something that people can, that they can surround themselves with. And someday, maybe when we're gone, there'll still be some elements of that left that people in the future can take and build from there. It's weird to call it a legacy because that's not the intent behind it either, but really a desire to create something that lasts, that people, our friends and our family, can look back on and say, God, that was kind of a special time and a special moment. And we're lucky to be a part of that. I don't think a lot of people really get that chance, or maybe take that risk or that chance to really do it. I love people. I love creating. I love music. I love art. I love film. I want that to be a part of my life, and I personally can't be. I don't think I could be fulfilled and feel like I lived my life to its extent if I don't create and do these things. And I don't think I'll ever stop. Will I maybe take breaks from time to time because I get burnt out? Yeah, God, yeah. I can't tell you how many times I told my partner, I'm done with North Innsbruck. And 2 weeks later going, well, fuck, no, I'm not. This is too cool. What else am I going to do with my time? So yeah, this will be a project that honestly, as it evolves, I don't think I'll ever really leave. I think it'll always be a part of me, be it the synthwave stuff, the darkwave stuff, or as I ideally, hopefully, throughout life, transition more into film composition and scoring. We'll still use that as a pseudonym to really connect this brief life, this work that I have and the time that I've got here on this planet, I guess, in this form of myself.
For myself.
Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
As I get real existential there, but I apologize there, but
oh, it's
that's the
perfect.
brain. So yeah,
No, that was perfect. Like it just really wrapped everything up, and I'm gonna go ahead and do my last question of the day. I think I pretty much covered all the
awesome.
ground that I need to, I mean, this
Yeah,
was an incredible conversation.
thank
Thank you
you
so
so
much
much.
for your time. And you couldn't have said it better any other way. I always end the podcast. If anybody looks up to your music or is listening to this podcast just to kind of distract themselves from the world or whatever, artists, musicians, do you have any piece of advice that you would give anybody listening on right now? What would be your
Yep.
personal bit of advice?
Yeah, yeah. Um, it's taken me my entire life to realize this and follow my own advice. Really, within the last year or so, even more so. But it's to be your authentic self, and and that takes great bravery, and a lot of work and a lot of insight. We're surrounded in a world right now where there's a lot of disingenuous people, a lot of information out there, a lot of uh, lack of truth in many ways. And if there is that recommendation, it is to look inside, to search yourself, to find out who you want to be, and to pursue that unapologetically. Don't live your life trying to be somebody that you're not. Don't live your life trying to fit into a box that someone else has created for you. I'm fairly convinced that's not a path to happiness, genuine, true happiness, lasting happiness. When I met my wife, one of the things that drew me to her the most was the fact that she was one of the most honest, one of the most real people, and showing the world who she was. And she could give a shit what anybody thinks about her because she's so happy with the person she is. Does that mean she's happy all the time? No, no. We all have ups and downs. But in the last year, what I've discovered is that there's certain things, and maybe this comes with middle age, right? But there's certain things that I don't want to put up with anymore, and things that I don't want in my life, or to that flip side again, things that I do want in my life. And what I want more than anything else is to blossom and become the person that I've always wanted to be, that I've been afraid to be. And as an artist, people are going to be attracted to that. That's something that I've seen. People want to be around real people. Going back to the word authenticity again, being genuine. Grab that, find that, and don't apologize for being who you are. Because when you find that, it doesn't matter what other people think anymore. It matters what you think. It matters what's in your heart. So take the time to find that and experiment. Are people going to react positively to it? Yeah. Are some people going to react negatively? Oh, absolutely. But it doesn't matter. Like, find that person. And that is one of the best ways I can come up with to find happiness. And if there's a message behind all this with North Innsbruck, the music, the art, the persona, that's really it. I'm not a spooky guy. The music may come across that way. I've had people say to me, "Wow, you seem kind of intimidating. I can't believe you're such a nice person." Yeah, it's okay. It's just it's who I am. It's my interests. I'm a good person, I think. It's at least I try to be. So to that point, it's about being real. It's about pursuing my own interests. And you know what? Do they contradict one another sometimes? Yeah, totally. But that's okay. We're human. We're walking contradictions. I'm okay with that. And I hope other people can be okay with that too.
Thank you, Chris, so much, man. I really
Yeah.
appreciate your time, buddy. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
All right, you
I
take it easy,
appreciate it.
buddy. All right, bye.
Yeah.